Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of An Evolved Review. I'm your host, James Caleb Kitchens. I'm joined each and every week by none other than my co-host, the man who watches more wrestling than anyone in the known multiverse, straight from the SWN, Caleb Stovall. Welcome.
It's true. What's going on, my man?
Don't throw the "it's damn true" in there. You'll get a cease and desist from Kurt Angle's lawyers.
Oh Lord.
And if you're watching this on any of our video platforms, you won't notice just yet if you're on audio. But we have a special guest with us today, none other from the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast, Myron. Welcome to the show, man. Finally glad to have you on here.
I am so glad to be here. Thank you, guys. I love doing things like this, and this is it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be here. There's been so many luminary guests y'all have had on, friends, people I look up to, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you. You could have picked a better episode, though.
That's true. You know, my buddy Ace, every time he comes on here, it's always like he covered the Benoit episodes with us. And then we brought him on this season to do Pillman. And it's like, yeah, if someone dies tragically and horribly, he's the guy. And we were talking about that on the episode. It's like, why can't you have me on for like a Herb Abrams or, something like that?
Well, at least they get heroes. I get a child molester for this episode.
Oh, that's true. I'm going to go ahead and put the disclaimer out here right now, folks, that this is going to be tough. Okay. Yeah. If you sat through this episode and you were insanely uncomfortable, you're probably about to sit through this podcast and be insanely uncomfortable too. As one can only be when talking about this, but I want to get this right out in the front. I think it's important to remember, if you listen to Dark Side of the Podcast, which I never plug on here, because if you're going to listen to a podcast about Dark Side of the Ring, I want you to listen to this one. But, it's got the producers on there, and they talked about the reason they really wanted to do this episode is because they wanted people who were victims like this family was to be able to come forward and to feel empowered to come forward. And so it's very important to keep in mind that that's the purpose of the episode, as we go through it, because it is very tough material.
Yeah. I listen to that podcast, obviously, all the time, literally the day after. And it actually, there was some problems downloading it and stuff like that. And I don't know if that has anything to do with some of the material that even they had to talk about on the podcast. But yeah, I can't wait to dive into it, man, because I will say this. I listened to Jim Cornette's review of it because obviously he likes Dark Side because he's on it and stuff like that. But he was just like, wow, man, that was an episode. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts.
It's definitely dark. Before we get into it, though, Myron, I want to give you a chance, man. You're from the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast. We plug you guys on here all the time.
Thank you. I do appreciate that every time.
I'm a patron. I listen every week. So tell us where we can hear that.
Well, that does mean a lot to me, folks. The Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast is available on every major podcasting platform, iTunes. It's available on Amazon Music, which is my personal favorite, and also we're on Facebook. We do a video show every week, and we do a Patreon with an early video show. And if you don't want to watch on Facebook, you can sign up for a free Patreon membership and watch it there when it releases for the fans. Yes.
Yeah, I'm a patron. I very much, and I don't give away my money for free, folks. Like I very much love the content that I get from that membership. It's definitely worth it.
Yes. Nick is probably the hardest working man in podcasting and comic book sales. I don't know if you know about that. He's got quite a lucrative comic sales business. Y'all gotta know. If you like comic books, check out him.
Yeah, everybody that we have on here is somehow involved in like comic books in some way, it seems.
It's wrestling, comic books, video games. I'm not into anime, but that's a big one too.
Yeah, I can recall the first time back when I used to still wrestle, being in the locker room, and one of the older guys comes in there and he's like, man, I used to walk in these locker rooms, and there'd be a bunch of old guys doing pills and shit, and now it's just a bunch of nerds playing Game Boys, and I was like, yeah, that's how it went. I think we're in a much better spot now.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. That being said,
speaking of pills and all kind of other abuse, this is the episode for that.
It definitely was. So the main event here today is the Grizzly Smith episode. In the Shadow of Grizzly Smith is the full title. This was a tough episode to get through. Myron, you got guest privilege here. I'll let you go first. What's kind of like your overall thoughts on this? You know, like before, you know, what did you think about the situation before you saw this episode, and then like when you saw the episode, you know, how did that kind of change your perception of it?
I had heard stories. I'd heard the story about how Jake was fathered. I'd heard things. I'd also heard a lot of stories about Grizzly Smith working the territories and always being in his car, going from town to town, and being never missing anything, and being Watts' front man out on the street. Reprehensible character. I have almost had Sam Houston as a guest on the show before. I didn't book that. That was booked by a friend of ours who wanted me to do it for him. And he ghosted me and didn't show up. And then about a week later, or 2 weeks later, he sent me a request asking to be on the show so he could talk about his message. Well, the message part is the disturbing thing, because I don't think anybody wanting to share messages, you know, really has anything worth saying. Sam is clearly probably the most damaged mentally of the group. Rockin' Robin seems to be the most well adapted, and Jake is Jake. We all know Jake struggles. This was a hard episode to watch. I grew up watching Jake the Snake when he was in WWE, when that character was the focus of every heel thing he could possibly do. He scared the hell out of people, mostly me. So seeing somebody that scared you in a vulnerable situation like this is a hard thing. But this is just a horrible story.
Yeah, absolutely. Caleb, same question. What about you, man?
What if I knew anything about Grizzly Smith?
Yes.
Or
yeah, what'd you know about this going into it, and then, you know, how did this episode kind of change that for you?
Well, so I knew about Jake's struggles. We all know about that. You know, that's been public knowledge. I didn't know all of this stuff. And now I'll be honest, as you know, as much wrestling as I watch and stuff like that, I don't know anything about Grizzly Smith. That was way before my time, and stuff like that. So I don't know anything about that. However, I do have a personal Jake the Snake story. My father, when I was a little kid and everything, when he worked for WGAC, the radio station in Augusta, Georgia, this was when wrestling was like really, really popular, and you know, they would actually go on radio stations and stuff like that. So Jake makes an appearance at WGAC on the morning show that my dad hosted, and so he got to meet Jake the Snake, and I was there with him, and I got to meet Jake the Snake Roberts that day. And Jake comes up to me because apparently my dad had been talking to him for a little bit, and he goes, I hear that you don't like snakes or something like that. And my dad comes up behind me as he's talking to me and just goes,
oh,
it's
God,
scared the piss out of me.
I can imagine.
But then they just sat there laughing at me, and I was just like, all right, well, so that was my introduction to Jake the Snake.
Right.
So, and then I have an autographed picture. I wish I had it with me. I don't have it with me. I'll try to bring it on like for a future podcast as like a little bonus thing. But like, I have an autographed picture of Jake the Snake Roberts.
I got one myself, but I got it late season Jake the Snake when he was at Southern Honor one night. And sweating.
I was going to say, is it on the wall behind you there?
It's up higher. It's up higher. I actually have probably another 20 or 30 of those things I need to get up on the wall. I just don't have the construction experience.
It's dangerous, man. When you start putting up art in your house, especially prints, it's so dangerous because number one, it costs a fortune to frame anything, and especially if you get anything custom framed.
Yes.
And then you never have enough space or enough time, and there's always stuff waiting to be hung up. Mm-hmm. It's just a never ending. It's a never ending thing. Um, I have a pretty good Jake story myself. It's very recent. Joe Brown and I from Joe from Suplexes and Microphones has been on the show a few times. So we went to Dragon Con in 2019. And this may have been Joe's first Dragon Con. I don't know, but we actually he had a panel there, and we got to listen to him speak. And he kind of talked about his story and his recovery, and like everybody in the room, I think, was like either in tears or on the verge of it because he's such a good storyteller. And the thing that made him such an incredible professional wrestler is he has that ability to pull you in to what he's trying to make you feel. And so when that emotion is genuine and he doesn't have to make it up for wrestling, it's like amplified, right?
Oh.
And we were sitting right there front row, and I was like, this is one of those times I wish I had been in the back. I don't want to be this close to him. Because, I was tearing up, especially because, everybody knows I'm a big Diamond Dallas Page mark. And, he was Superman to me when I was a kid. And so, to find out that, the guy you thought was a hero as a kid, as an adult really is a hero to somebody was incredible to me. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That might be the last heartwarming thing that gets said on this podcast.
Real quick, back to your original question. I didn't know much about Sam Houston until recently because I listened to What Happened When with Tony Schiavone. They've been covering all of '86 on the NWA, and I was actually going back and watching those old studio shows, which, by the way, is some of the greatest stuff I've ever seen. Even though it's a bunch of jobber matches, I don't care. I wish they would. Well, NWA with Billy Corgan has brought it back and whatnot, the studio wrestling. But I wish someone else would also bring it back because that stuff was awesome back in the day. But I didn't know much about Sam Houston, but I've seen a few of his matches since then, and he really is a really good worker. He was not, though, a good promo person, not whatsoever. His promos were terrible, but he's a really good worker.
Well, we always get into who they interview for the episode, and in my opinion, Dark Side of the Ring is usually at its best when it's a small cast, and everybody has a lot of time to talk. And this is one of those episodes where they kept it very tight. It's mostly the family. Jim Cornette's on here, but for the most part, we get the family. There's some other people that come in. Baby Doll's on here, but for the most part, they kept it to the kids.
And then my favorite, Buzz.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I think out of everybody that talked, Sam Roberts is he just seemed deranged and gone.
Sam Houston?
Yes.
Sam Houston.
Yes.
Don't dare say that name.
Yeah, my bad.
I really do think he is deranged and gone. But look, folks, everyone here had a substantial mental illness, whether it be substance abuse. I don't know what you're going to call pedophilia, but some people had impulse control issues, basically. These people were damaged. I think Robin was probably the most appealing character on the show.
Right.
I'll agree with that.
Yeah, I very much like that at no point in time do they give Grizzly Smith any sort of anything to make you think that he was anything other than a monster. Yeah. And that's important. They talked about his beginnings, and anytime you talk about somebody's coming of age story or whatever, there's always that sort of inspiring bit or whatever. You run the risk of making them an endearing character. They did not do that here, thankfully. Very skilled narrative on the part of Dark Side of the Ring, because they talk about him working in the oil field and how he just was a tough guy, and people used to come up and hit him in the stomach for money, which is interesting, and then they talk about him getting into wrestling, and it's very shortly after that they get into the kids. Cornette comes on and he's talking about how he would hear references and jokes and things like that, but none of them had any idea what was actually going on, at least no one's willing to say they had any idea of what was going on.
Yeah.
But you know, at least with Cornette here, I believe him, because if Cornette had known, there's no way he would have gone around speaking so highly of Grizzly Smith for the next 20 years.
Yeah, yeah. Baby Doll was kind of troubling. I think she was probably, maybe she knew. I don't know. But it was the whole thing was warped. The whole thing was the parents waving as their 14-year-old daughter got in the car with Grizzly Smith to go ride around the wrestling territories.
Yeah. That's the one that got me. Like when I heard that, I was like, wait, what? Like, why would those parents do that? Do they owe Grizzly money or something like that? Like, do they owe it? Like, what the fuck was that?
I spent a little while on that same line of questioning, and then I just decided I didn't want to know the answer.
Well, no, fandom. I think maybe fandom. I have a daughter. She's 17 now. I've always been paranoid. It's one of my worst categories, but not categories, characteristics. But I was always freaking out that somebody would try to hurt that child. Maybe it was a more naive time, you know. Maybe child molestation and kidnapping and all these other things weren't brought up the way it is now. But
yeah, it's very possible, and that kind of goes into why they, you know, that's why they want to do the episode, and why they wanted to have, you know, them come out and share their experiences and talk about this stuff, because it is very real, and it's stuff that goes on way more often than we would like to think it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But, you know, if, like, fucking, like, Bray Wyatt showed up at somebody's house and wanted to take their kid on a road trip with them, they wouldn't let him go. Like,
no.
You know, what the hell?
No.
Maybe we're in a better place as a society that we know this now.
Yeah, I agree.
He would be that Me Too movement, like, right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, and rightfully so.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I like how very early in the episode, they let Jake just break the ice. He just says, my dad was a disgusting pedophile.
Yeah.
And it was like, you could just hear the brakes in the background. You know, record player stops. You know, it was just like, that's a hell of a thing to lead in with, like, you know, 5 minutes into the episode.
Yes.
Yeah. My father was a pedophile. Like, just
they set this stuff up so well. Chris Jericho is so damn good. I thought I was gonna really want to see Dutch Mantel continue, but since Jericho has taken over, I really think as a narrator, he's phenomenal.
Yeah,
I like Dutch. I really love the I think Mick only did one episode.
Yeah,
right?
I think so.
The Bruiser episode.
Yeah.
And that may be my favorite. It's certainly our audience's favorite episode. We've got like so many damn views and comments and everything. If you go and look at our YouTube page and look at that episode, there's like a whole debate in the comment section about it. I mean, it's just, you know, it's the kind of, you know, like fan interaction that you hope for when you do something like this.
Yeah.
And it's our most popular episode on audio platforms. So I loved Mick's narration in that one, but you're right. Jericho, it's like Jericho is made for this. I mean, he just does such a great job with it.
Yeah, he does. I love it. I've loved it ever since he took over and stuff like that. And Mick Foley really only did the Bruiser Brody one because they knew that a lot of modern wrestling fans today would not recognize Bruiser Brody's name and stuff like that right off the bat. So they're like, well, here is a guy that people know. Everyone knows Mick Foley by now, you know. So they're like, all right, well, if we have him, you know, lead in, then it can work, or, you know, it can make this seem bigger and stuff like that. But I love Chris Jericho as the narrator. And before we go any further, I gotta say this about Jake the Snake Roberts, man. I just, every time, just put him in front of a camera, just put him anywhere and just let him talk, and I will be able to sit there for hours and be entertained. Just, oh my God, like even the stories that he's telling, and I get that they're all personal, but just the way that he tells them. I mean, the way that he, you know, he's still selling the Jake the Snake Roberts character too. Even like when he does his little like that, like I'm just like I love it. I can't help it. because I know we're about to talk about a lot of uncomfortable stuff still, but just the way that he talks, man, oh my God, he just shows why he's been or why he is considered one of the greatest promos of all time.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I still hope that he gets his own episode because there's enough with Jake where they could still come back in a season 4 or season 5 and give him his own episode because there's a ton of stuff that they could not cover here.
Yeah.
You know, as a matter of fact, the producers of the show said, like, we had enough material. We could have done a season of this.
Oh, God. Can you only imagine what they had?
Yeah,
well, not just Jake the Snake, but how about Sam Houston?
Yeah. 32 Crown and Cokes. I figured that up. And that's not like a handle.
Yeah, we were talking about that, and I was like, man, okay, I would be impressed if you drank 32 Cokes. Just Cokes. Right? I mean, because that's a lot of Coke. I mean, that's a lot of sugar, man. Like a can of Coke has 56 grams of sugar in it, right? That's a lot of sugar. That's a lot of carb. I'm just saying. That's a lot.
He drank 2/5 of liquor. To put it in liquor terms, he drank 2 bottles of Crown Royal.
Yeah,
I've drank 1 bottle of Crown Royal at a sitting of a long sitting. I'm not proud of my liquor tolerance. 2 bottles would have killed me. Even at the most liquor I could have drank, 2 bottles would have killed me. How?
Yeah,
I had so many DUIs.
I like a good Crown and Coke, but I don't think I've had 32 Crown and Cokes in a month.
Well, you know, these were the 70s. I don't know what to tell you. Guys, that's crazy. And I told Mr. Kitchens the other day, I said, the best thing they did this whole episode was Baby Doll, for fuck's sake. Last time I saw her, she looked like she'd been in a river 3 or 4 days, dead. And they actually made her not look quite as bloated. It was she's not attractive anymore, but good God.
That was just quite the way to put it.
Well,
I might have to steal that one.
Yes.
All right, so let's go through here and just kind of, we talked about Jake, but there's one line in the episode that I don't want to skip over this. He talks about his real name, his government name, Aurelian Smith, which is a cool name. But I love the line in the show where he says that person kind of ceased to exist around age 12 or 13, and he just has never been that person again. And like, I'm like, I really hope this guy has a great therapist, because there's legitimate like DID, kind of symptoms here that he's displaying. This is like a real thing that happens to people where, you go through such a traumatic event that you create like another personality to take on that trauma. And it's a real thing. It's kind of a very toned down of like what the movie Split was about. And I just thought that was powerful and incredibly interesting.
Very disturbing, very disturbing. I have a good therapist, but my therapist couldn't even help him. I mean, he needs like next level, like team of scientists and therapists. God almighty, that when he said that, it was, I'm Jake the Snake. I can handle Jake the Snake when he's chained. Jake the Snake's a bad guy, and he became that guy to hide his pain.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And unfortunately, he's in the business where that is pretty much most celebrated, is when you lose yourself in a character like that. Like that's where you're supposed to, is pro wrestling. Well, it seems like he took it a step further, and we just didn't realize it all these years later, and stuff like that. It sucks though in a way, because it's like, well, if he hadn't have gone that far into his character, would he be as good at his promos and stuff like that?
It's a cautionary tale, man, because if you look at this season, every subject this season so far has fallen into that trap. Pillman, Nick Gage, Jim Hellwig,
Jake.
I mean, all of them at some point or another, they fell too far into their characters. Nick Gage is still his character all the time, 100% of the time. He just is that guy.
I can
Um,
watch that one. I'm too old school. I can't. I'm not a deathmatch fan. Nothing against anybody that likes it. Just had no interest in that one.
well, hey, folks, cheap plug. If you want to go check out that episode, you can find it anywhere your podcasts are heard.
Yes.
All right, so we talked about Jake. Let's talk about Robin, which is somebody that a lot of people today may or may not be familiar with. She was a great performer. I haven't seen a ton of her stuff because she's before my time, but the stuff I have seen has been pretty good. And I agree with you, Myron. I think that she was probably the most well put together of everybody.
Yeah. That pic. Do you see that picture of her, Bambi and Malia Hasaka? I saw that and I'm like, oh my God, that was a long time ago. I think, and I was really, the thing that hurt me the most is these three people that could help each other are no longer in contact at all.
Yeah, that they've never been close. That's one of the things that's really just awful about all of this is that it's not just the physical and the sexual abuse, it's the mental abuse too,
Yes.
because they were all separated.
They were
It's
divided on purpose.
Yeah, because if they could have come together, then they probably could have done something about it.
Yeah.
But if you keep them all isolated and feeling like they're completely alone all the time, you start to develop sort of Stockholm syndrome for your abuser, because that's the only person you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, the story that really got me, or one of them, was obviously one of them, but was when she was talking about how the first time she went, she was, I guess, living with him, or I don't know exactly, but there was like a few months where he didn't even show her any attention. He ignored her.
Mhm.
He didn't love her or anything, and at that age for a child, that's very confusing, because it's like all you want at that age is the love of your parents. She even says that, that's all you want at that age. And it's true. If your parents don't love you, well, then, who does, and stuff like that. And then, her mother was out one day and he does the whole daddy loves you and everything. Daddy loves you. He's just under all this stress. And then he put his hands on her and stuff like that. And that was the first time that he put his hands on her. I literally looked at the TV and I was just like, you motherfucker. Like that just, like, if I saw or heard someone doing that and I saw them in front of me, I would punch them straight in the face. Like I would do something about that.
I don't mean to cast Grizzly in a positive light, but is this behavior learned or taught? Was he someone who experienced it himself and knew how to do it from that?
I was trying to figure that out myself, because there's a little video clip that they show, and it's really the only time that we hear his voice, which is where he was like, my father gave me a whooping, or gave you a whooping when he thought you needed it. He gave you a whooping every time you did something stupid or anything like that. Well, he said, when you thought you needed it. All right, what does that classify in your eyes? What does that mean? I don't know, but something somewhere he flipped and thinks it's okay to do all this stuff. I don't know. I can't fathom a human being acting like that.
I definitely got the idea from that clip that you referenced that he was at least physically abused as a kid.
Yeah.
And that generates a lot of anger and hatred and just, kind of a disdain for people's humanity in people.
Yeah.
And especially if you never got any help, which of course he didn't, because back then that wasn't a thing that people did. If you went to go see a therapist, then you were a crazy person out of your mind and they should lock you up.
Yeah.
Mental health was, is still stigmatized today.
Yeah.
But back then it was a million times worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, you get the idea that he was probably at least physically abused as a kid. And I mean, all those times that he was ignoring her, I mean, he was grooming her.
Yeah.
He was making her attention starved so that when he gave her his twisted version of attention, that she would reciprocate. And that is incredibly fucking sick, folks. I
evil.
mean,
Evil.
Just oh my God. Like,
right.
Like I would it'd be the only time where I'd be like, I'm gonna kill this motherfucker, like if I see him, like kind of thing. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think everybody who watched this episode was just like, I could fucking shoot Grizzly Smith in the face and then sleep like a baby that night,
But you know what? But here's the thing: as the episode's going on, I'm thinking this can't get much worse, and then.
That's the perfect lead in, because I was just going to talk about Jolene, which was the half sister. This is an incredibly disturbing part of the episode, possibly the most disturbing, because she goes and she talks to Robin, and basically it's from the way Robin talks about it, she didn't exactly come out and say what happened, but she could tell. I mean, having gone through it herself, she could tell that the abuse had happened and that she was possibly considering exposing him or trying to do something about it. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, she's gone without a trace. And I think the smoking gun here is that there's no note left. They say there was no sign of a struggle in the house, but he said that she was kidnapped.
Yeah.
I mean, if you come home and the kid's missing, how do you immediately go to they were kidnapped if there's not like a note or a ransom or?
Yeah, that's the weirdest thing about that whole thing. Did someone see it happen? The trailer park guy, the trailer park supervisor, was the one who waved down the cop in the situation. Now, I looked into this. There's not a lot of information flowing around about this, except for on some of those wrestling pages where they just go out of the way to expose past sins of people. There are pages out there like that, and they're kind of fascinating. But she married a man much older than her. She had made herself a new life outside of the situation. She meets with Robin, and she disappears. I don't even know. I mean... I can't even speculate. So much involved in this.
There is, because on the one hand, the person who is really suspected is the ex-wife, right? Of Jolene's current husband at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that what I was gathering from?
Yes, she served time for it, actually.
Yeah. And she confessed to it, but without the body, they can't, they can't convict it as murder because they're like, well, we don't know what happened to her, kind of thing. And when I heard the incinerator part, that was when I just was just like, here was the thing. I was listening to the Ultimate Warrior Dark Side of the podcast, right? And at the end of it, they were hyping Grizzly Smith, and they said, this is probably the darkest episode we've ever done. And I thought, there is no fucking way in hell that this is darker than Owen Hart and Chris Benoit. I was wrong.
It's right up there with them.
Freaking wrong on that. Like, I can't even fathom that. And here was the thing that I don't know if this was evidence or just something that stuck out to me, but Jake the Snake said it. He was like, that was the only time my father ever missed a wrestling match. Was for that. So
yeah, I gotta speculate on that him being such a I was gonna say, how can I say this and give the man the least amount of credit possible? Him being such a reliable person for the wrestling business and being such a professional as far as attending shows and meeting his wrestling obligations. I think that that's something that a person like this does to try to make up for how like awful they are outside of this.
That would make sense.
You know, it's like they're telling themselves that they're like, you know, it's like, oh, these terrible things that I'm doing. He had to have known it was wrong, you know, but it's like, oh, well, I can segment that away from this persona that I put out here for everybody else. That's the real me. That's not really me doing all these terrible things. Yeah. You know, it's like that's how I could put it together inside of his head, you know. And it's like the twistedness just has no limits, you know, as far as like the mental derangement of this guy.
Yeah. And the part where he brought the girl over to Robin's house.
I was gonna say like I remember that story as well. Like, and she knew something was up. Like, she was just like, "You're going, but she's staying here." Can you imagine how much guts it took for her to do that?
Right.
Like, you know, they kind of gloss over that. But when you're hearing all these stories and stuff like that, I would not put it past this dude and like him like lean back and just start beating the shit out of her. Because he could do it. He was, I mean, he was big and stuff like that. And I'm sure he would do that. I'm sure he probably would have tried to kill her right there.
I think he did that. It's just another gesture of power, as taking advantage of someone and showing someone you took advantage of that you're still doing it. Maybe that was where it was. It was all so traumatic, though.
Yeah. I mean, it must have taken a lot of guts to stand up to him like that. I mean, in that moment, I was just like, this is not somebody that you want to fuck with.
No.
She has been through stuff that would break most people. And for her to be sitting here telling this story, and for her to have done that is incredible. You know.
Yeah. I mean, she says the line in the thing. She's like, "Drinking was never a problem. I did it quite well."
Yeah. I mean, how could you not?
That's my thing. Now I kind of get why Jake the Snake, you know, had all these drug problems and stuff like that. Because it's just like, dude, how can you not?
Yeah, I would probably do crack too. I mean, if you know, it's like whatever, you know, if you go through this amount of pain as a child, and are living with it as an adult, and I mean, you know, there's so many layers to this because it's like, okay, he endured it, he had to watch his father do it to other people. You know, I'm sure he blamed himself that he could have saved other people from his dad. You know, it's so many layers to this. So when he goes and finds a substance that can turn all that off, yeah, I mean, you can completely see why he would go down that path. Not condoning that at all, folks. Therapy, not crack. All right? If you listen to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got good insurance, which is sad that you have to have good insurance for mental health care.
Yeah. Therapy good, crack bad. If you don't have health care, just stick to weed. That'll do it.
Well, it's better than crack.
Right. Yeah. Way better. You won't get a Dark Side of the Ring episode off smoking weed.
Crack, no, we're not going to get the Rob Van Dam episode, folks. It's not going to happen.
That's right. That being said, I want to talk about we can kind of detour from the real hard shit here for a second. I want to talk about Sam Houston, and I this is one thing that they talk about in this episode, and I it's something that is relevant to the wrestling business. They use the term a good hand, and you know, a good hand in the wrestling business has sort of become the, you know, sweet Southern belle, bless your heart, of the wrestling business. It's like, it's a way to say that the guy's not bad, but isn't going anywhere either. You know, it's like a good hand used to be, you know, I think it was originally designed as like a way to compliment somebody, but I think over time it has evolved into like well, you know, they're all right to have on the show, but like, you don't have plans for them. They're not going anywhere. And that's how they describe Sam Houston.
Yeah.
Well, again, you know, around his time, right? He's in the NWA. He wrestles a lot for Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling and stuff like that. That was part of the NWA. think of who all was coming through there. He was having to work with Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, the Four Horsemen, all of these people. You had all of these personalities. And while he was a good wrestler, he just there was no personality. They tried to push him. They tried to do stuff with him because he was so good in the ring and stuff like that. They gave him the Mid-Atlantic Championship, but that was it. Like he wasn't gonna. He didn't have the charisma of a Ric Flair or Dusty Rhodes or Magnum TA at the time and stuff like that. He didn't have that, unfortunately. And I think also around that time, his demons really started to creep up on him. Because like like it said, he marries Baby Doll and stuff like that. And, the night that he told about people about his engagement, he had 37, alcoholic beverages.
To his credit, it was 32.
32. I don't know why I said 37. 32.
There's no need to exaggerate.
Sam, it's just wrestling. Sam was the least appealing character on this entire show. The person who I believe had less like progress through this, and we never got any stories about him being abused or harmed. But you get to take that he's not any better. Robin is clearly doing better. Jake has been a long way to getting better. Sam's still crazy as shit. And when he was wanted me to press him, when people find hard Jesus, where they go that so far into something, they get addicted to Jesus the same way they get addicted to crack and alcohol. And I think that's just that whole complex.
Yeah.
The Marty Jannetty flavor.
Yes.
Of all of that.
Well, they were talking about it on Dark Side of the podcast, because we talked about how Jake Roberts, he said it himself. He hasn't been Aurelian Smith Jr. for 30-something years, and he probably never will be again. Sam Houston is the same way. He has not been Michael Smith for at least 30 plus years as well. He is Sam Houston, and they said that Baby Doll said that like he gets upset when people don't refer to him as Sam Houston.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine how hard of a time he had in prison.
Yeah, he tried to hang himself.
Yeah, I mean, and he thought he was going to die in jail. He was told he was going to die in jail.
Yeah,
he thought he was going to be in there for 30 years.
Here's my thing. I wonder, just from the tone of the way that he said it, I don't know if it's because he's so broken, which is why he sounded like this, but the way that he said this, right? He said, "Oh, my dad was my hero," and stuff like that. I'm like, like, could he have been abused, or was he might not have been abused like they were? Maybe for whatever reason, Grizzly Smith took a liking to him, because you heard that, like, he got busted out by Grizzly.
Yeah, and he kind of gives me this impression of like, you have Jake and Robin, who were like the special, like talented kids,
intelligent.
Yeah, and then you have Sam, who's like he's the guy in all the sitcoms who's like the lazy family member that's not going anywhere and like comes in crashing on the couch at 3 a.m. or gets evicted from his apartment and all that. Yeah. He's that guy. He's the I could never live up to my dad or my siblings guy, and it affected him in a different way. It's still trauma. It's a different kind of trauma.
Yeah, well, we shouldn't minimize that, because he clearly was affected by it. But
absolutely,
he was the least compelling, like, to make you not feel sorry for, but to have some kind of sympathy for and to feel for that person. Sam just didn't seem like he was. It's not an appealing character,
right? Yeah, I mean, I could not imagine talking to that guy for like more than 20 minutes.
I'm glad that interview never happened. I'll be honest with you.
Can you imagine? You would have some stories.
Oh yeah, and it's Lord wrestling.
Well,
so let's get into the surprise here. You know, we find out that there's another son. We find out that Richard exists. You know, and this was a thing that was like, okay, it was one thing where the family was so separate and to the point that nobody even, there were people in the wrestling business that didn't know they were related. But, you know, lo and behold, we find out that there's another child that never even got involved in wrestling. And I mean, out of all of them, he definitely seems like, you know, he's the most like together, like, and least traumatized, you know?
Well, he got out quick.
Right, exactly. You know, he wasn't in proximity to Grizzly Smith until he was like, you know, like to the point where he couldn't harm anybody.
Yeah, changing his diaper when he was in last days. He was the guy that was almost like a test, you know, like a control in a lab experiment. You know, you have your give these people this placebo, give the other people drugs. Well, he got the placebo and he almost turned out normal with the less exposure to Grizzly Smith.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was given up for adoption too, right?
He went to live with a couple, I can't remember the relationship, that could not have children. And I guess he was raised by them.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, you know, we talk about trauma too. There is some because, you know, he said his dad never even apologized to him for giving him up for adoption.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was obviously very lucky that this happened. Yeah. Because, I mean, he hit the jackpot, folks. If you look at his siblings and what he could have gone through as a child, I mean, you know, it's like, it seems like he did have I guess somewhat of a relationship with Grizzly in his last days. But I mean, Alzheimer's is terrible. There's no telling like how coherent he was or was not, you know, during that time. And you know, the thing that's really shocking and part of the reason why the episode needed to happen is that they all kept this to themselves until he died.
Yeah.
You know, there's several layers to that, right? Just it's like you could do an episode peeling that out. Like, you know, it's like where they're so terrified of him as kids that even in his old age, they still could not come forward with this stuff because there's no telling. I mean, the last time that someone tried to come forward against him, they disappeared.
Yeah.
And they never found the body.
And it was his own daughter.
Right.
It wasn't just someone coming forward, it was his own daughter. Like,
right.
That's what's even more disturbing because I know parents who, like, if anything ever happened to their child, they never forgive themselves, you know, kind of thing. And just hearing that, like, I can't even fathom it. And, you know, they asked Richard, they asked him, they said, why'd you never get into the wrestling business? He's like, I didn't want to travel. You know, that wasn't the life for me and stuff like that. So I think that was another reason he turned out more put together because he didn't join the wrestling business, you know?
Just getting into wrestling is enough.
Well, how about Grizzly not even smartening his kids up?
Yeah. That's true. That's another interesting take on the whole thing.
Yeah, he actually played out the angles in at home. Like Jake, you know, said the story. Like he, you know, would play the angle out, and he would act like the guys are coming over to kill him. Basically, like Jake thought that like someone was coming to kill him and stuff like that, and he never told him what was going on. And he, you know, he says in the episode, I should have figured it out a long time ago, but you know, you don't know that stuff as a child. So I can't imagine playing with your kids like that. Like that's just
it was all about control.
Then again, I can't imagine a lot of stuff that happened in this episode. I mean,
and that's a good thing.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's horrible.
Everything was about control. This whole entire thing was about control. He was a victimizer. He was an abuser. He was clearly a very intelligent man who was also very evil.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think, even the most even abusive parents, most of them have convinced themselves that they love their kid, at
Yeah.
least,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like, for you to abuse your kid in any way is fucked up.
Yeah.
But for you to then kill them or be involved in or complicit in their death, because we don't know, we can't, we don't know.
Yeah. I mean, nobody knows.
But for that to happen, I mean, that's another level of you're just the most fucked up evil person. I mean, that's just that's on a level I can't even fathom. You know.
Yeah.
My dad beat the hell out of me, and he was verbally abusive and physical abusive my entire life. And I was traumatized by that, and it took a long time to get over that. But he never did the shit Grizzly Smith did to his kids. I mean, just the psychological abuse was fucking horrible. Just the way he treated those kids and he was manipulating his own children.
Yeah.
And that's a whole special kind of evil.
Yeah, I mean, I used to think that my childhood was rough because I went through some of the same stuff, like physical abuse, and I mean that does things to you. But I had it way better than any of these guys, except for Richard, who got a lifeline out of there. It's like these guys had a fucked up childhood. I mean, not to play comparative suffering here, because that's a zero-sum game. That's a lose-lose situation.
Well, that's. I mean, hearing y'all's stories and stuff like that. I mean, mine's different. My dad was amazing. I miss him every day of my life and stuff like that. So I had a very different childhood. So I can't fathom a parent acting like that. Like I can't. I can't imagine.
Yeah. No.
It's just
as a parent, my only goal, I didn't want to be a parent, honestly. I never wanted to have children because I didn't want to be in that position as affecting someone's life. And once I became a parent, my only goal was not to fuck my kids up as bad as my parents fucked my head up, just to give the child a better chance. And parenting is something that has affected me on every level. It's changed me dramatically. But this is not like what he did. What he did was so just, I don't understand. There's got to be some form of illness or some form of anger or something with him where you could hurt the thing that could make you proud. But then again, he had 5 children, for Christ's sakes. He married multiple women. Just a horrible human being.
And I'm pretty sure none of their mothers were above the age of 20.
Oh, no. They were all very young, apparently.
Yeah. Like Jake's mother was 13.
And he was dating her grandmother. Grizzly was dating Jake's grandmother, and while he raped and impregnated Jake's mother.
Yeah. Just, oh my God. Like,
the world is a better place without him in it.
Here's something.
Agreed.
Yeah, I got to agree with that statement. Here's something I'm curious about that no one brought up. Maybe Jake and them didn't know or whatnot. But did anybody think what kind of drugs Grizzly was on? Was he on any?
I think this was his drug.
Yeah. I mean,
but I'm just saying, like, was he drinking all the time? Was he doing cocaine? Was he, doing all this stuff, or just was he just sick in the head like that?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: is everybody has their vices.
Mm-hmm.
Some people get into drugs. Some people get into alcohol. Some people get into cigarettes, tobacco. Some people get into online gaming. Some people, you can get, if you have the addictive personality, you can get addicted to anything. I think this guy was addicted to control and manipulation. I think there's no way that he did not get some sick satisfaction out of it. We could sit here and talk for 2 hours and peel back the psyche of Grizzly Smith and never come up with anything other than the fact that he was just a bad fucking person. I mean, he probably has some trauma in there too. But it's like bringing that up. It's almost like if you bring it up, are you trying to excuse what he did? Because of course nobody's trying to do that.
Yeah.
No.
So that being said, we are getting close to the end of this. So I want to get everybody's like kind of final thoughts and wrap up here on the episode. Caleb, did you have any like takeaways from this or anything else you wanted to add?
I'll talk about the takeaways, but real quick, I'll start it on a kind of laughter note. I have to give my favorite person though of the episode, Buzz, because when I saw him, immediately what I thought of was please someone in the background play the background music of Woody's Roundup.
Fair enough. That was a lovely mustache he had.
I mean, it just was like I just wanted him to say, "Yeah, my biscuits are burning." I'm just saying, like, but he was obviously very informative and stuff like that. He was a necessary part of the episode, but just I couldn't help it. I was like, oh my God, this dude's too much. But no, man. Like I said, when I heard about this episode before seeing it, that it was the darkest episode of Dark Side that they've ever done, or at least that's what a lot of people were saying. I was just like, there's no way in hell this is darker than, like I said, Benoit and Owen Hart. But then watching this, I was like, oh my God, like I was not prepared for where this was going to go. And even seeing the disclaimer, I mean, we've seen some of the darkest stories so far on Dark Side of the Ring. None of them have had a disclaimer. Owen Hart and Benoit didn't have a disclaimer before the episode. This episode had to have the warning symbol. Like, that just showed you what you were in for. That was preparing you and stuff like that.
That's how you knew it was about to go off the rails.
Yeah, exactly, man. I just was like, okay, so where is all this going to go? And then the pedophileness, the raping, the all this other stuff. I was like, oh my, the murder. Like, I just was like, oh my God. Like, I think we've said it before so much on here. Hollywood writers could not write a Hollywood script this, compelling and stuff like that. This, I don't want to say good or anything, because I'm not trying to make the situation good, but you get what I'm saying from like a TV show story perspective. Like, they couldn't come up with this. Everyone would be like, oh, well, that's obviously far-fetched. And then you're actually hearing it. Like it's like, oh my God. And I knew a lot about Jake's struggles going into this. I did not know anything about Rockin' Robin and Sam Houston's struggles as well with this. Like, I was like, okay. And I'm really glad that we didn't go so much into Jake's struggles that it became all about him, because again, I've already really seen that. And I'm sure there's more stuff that we could even learn from that. But I'm just glad that they focused on one thing, which was Grizzly Smith, just a monster. Robin said that. So, yeah, I was. This was a hard episode. It's one though that I admit though I've probably watched about 5 times since seeing it. Like, it's that good. And plus, again, I'm a huge Jake the Snake Roberts fan, man. Like, literally one of the greatest storytellers of all time in pro wrestling. I even loved his little Jake the Snake, quirks in there, like him just smiling and stuff like that. Even while talking about this horrible stuff, he still is Jake. Pretty much goes to show you he's not Aurelian Smith. That dude's gone. Jake the Snake is literally who he is.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So
I agree entirely there. It's tough to um, it's tough to watch. All of it is, but it's when you said it's compelling. It is. This could have been a whole season of Criminal Minds.
yeah,
It's like you're watching a car wreck. You
yeah.
shouldn't,
Well,
but
and not just that, but I really liked what the episode has done for a lot of people, because a lot of people have, given feedback to this episode, and they're saying like, man, that really helped to hear that stuff, because I've been through that kind of stuff. You never know who's out there watching this stuff and what it could, possibly be doing for them. Like, it could be helping them because they're like, hey, this person's gone through these struggles. And Jake says it. I think probably the thing that I take away from this the most is the end shot of Jake the Snake saying, I survived. And he's looking at the AEW arena and stuff like that. That was before he went on pay-per-view and stuff like that. So that's great. I mean, they survived. They're still dealing with it every single day, but they have come out the other side, and that's saying something.
yeah, agreed. It's powerful stuff, and it's the reason that they make the episode,
Yeah.
right? And I meant to bring it for this episode, but I actually have one of Jake's challenge coins, it says I'm paraphrasing here, but it says something like my past is not my destiny, or something like that. I love that. It's really powerful for him, for somebody who's been through the shit he's been through. It's like, if he's been through that, maybe he can inspire somebody else to know that they can get through the shit they've dealt with. That being said, Myron, what's your final thoughts on this one?
Well, I think, honestly, I hate to put over our panel here, but the fact that we couldn't figure out Grizzly Smith's personality behavior says a lot of good things about us as people. You shouldn't understand shit like that. Okay. I'm glad this episode was made if it helps people. I'm not ever going to watch it again. It's closed to me, but I hope someone can benefit from this, because this was a very dire subject, and it is stuff that goes on today still in some form. In a business like wrestling, what's built on lies and deceit, and convincing people what's real is not real, and what's not real is real. This thing could happen, and we hear about it happening on a regular basis, especially wrestling recently. We've seen something blow up in the local area of wrestling. Folks, if you're like somebody where Baby Doll was in that situation, where you see somebody putting a young girl in a car, you get out the goddamn car and you call somebody. Okay? Let's try to raise awareness so that these people are stopped in the future.
Agreed.
That's all my take.
Agreed.
And that's the takeaway from this,
Yeah.
That being said, this was definitely hard to get through, gentlemen, but thank you for joining me here for this. I want to talk about some of the stuff we have coming up that's considerably lighter.
Supposedly.
I don't know about lighter. We're about to talk about Ultimate Warrior for about 2 hours here shortly, and so that's going to be coming out. This episode will hit probably tomorrow, which will be Friday the 11th. And then shortly after that, we'll have the Warrior episode coming out. Next week, we're going to cover the Dynamite Kid episode of Dark Side of the Ring. And then we're also going to be talking about the Mick Foley A&E biography episode. And of course, that leaves just the Bret Hart A&E biography episode. That one is coming, but it's going to be probably 2 weeks before we get to it. I will be honest, I am happy that those are over. You can check those episodes out and hear more on why I'm happy those are over.
You're not the only one, folks.
Yeah.
And if I'm saying it, then you know.
Yeah. He's Dave Meltzer. I'm Cornette here. He's supposed to be the sunshine and rainbows guy. That being said, man, Myron, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I promise next time you're on the show, we will find something where there's no sexual
Doink the
assault
Clown or anybody positive.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm down
so,
for it. But I soldiered through this episode, and I am very touched that you asked me, and I had a wonderful time, gentlemen. Thank you so much. It's nice meeting you, Mr. Caleb Stovall.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I have to call you James Caleb Kitchens, and I don't know what it is. I hope you never grow up to be an assassin, because I see James Caleb Kitchens, Lee Harvey Oswald, Mark David Chapman. I can't. I got to figure out how to call you something else, man.
well, the funny thing about that is, people. So when I was young, when I was growing up, I was just Caleb. That's what my parents call me. And then when I got into like my professional life, it was like that was like people can't spell it, or like it's hard for them, which is weird. Especially because we're in the South and it's a biblical name.
Yeah.
And it's like, it, but if they could read, they'd be real upset. So that's a different thing. And so I don't really like any of my names, but I like them all together.
Yeah.
And so I think James Caleb Kitchen sounds cool. When I hear that, I think of myself. When I hear James or Caleb, that doesn't really. It's like I answer to it, of course, but like that just doesn't. I don't like it. So yeah. Maybe I like how they are together.
Stay away from school book depositories, and we'll be okay.
Yeah, and it's helpful for this because a lot of our guests that come on will call me Kitchens and him Stovall because it's confusing otherwise. Especially people like Chris Wiggins, who calls me Caleb also. So,
which my name is actually Caleb. So,
right. Yeah. So that being said, folks, we are all out of time. Thank you guys again for joining us, and this, of course, has been an Involved Review.